Welcome to BBC News, broadcasting to viewers in North America and around the globe. My name is Nkem Ifejika. Our top stories. Caught in a corruption scandal, the ANC says the fate of South Africa's President Zuma will be decided within 24 hours. Could there be a thaw in relations between Washington and Pyongyang? US Vice President says he is ready to talk to North Korea. President Putin orders a special investigation into the crash of a Russian airliner near Moscow. All 71 passengers and crew were killed. Oxfam faces crisis talks with the UK government following claims of sexual misconduct by aid workers. Hello and welcome to the programme. South Africa's ruling party, the ANC, says that it will hold a meeting as pressure continues to grow on President Jacob Zuma. The party wants him to stand down following allegations of corruption. The ANC's leader, Cyril Ramaphosa, said a final decision on President Zuma's future will be decided on Monday afternoon. Now, for the last week, the two men have been holding talks on the transition of power. Here's Sarah Corker.
At an event marking 100 years since the birth of Nelson Mandela, it was the clearest signal yet that the end of the troubled presidency of Jacob Zuma is near. Addressing the crowds in Cape Town, ANC leader and South African president-in-waiting Cyril Ramaphosa promised a resolution, a decision on Mr. Zuma's future.
We are currently engaged, comrades, in discussions around the transition to a new administration and specifically to resolve the issues of the position of the President of the Republic of South Africa.
For the last week, Mr. Ramaphosa and Mr. Zuma have been negotiating the President's exit strategy. But with the country in limbo, the ANC's National Executive Committee is holding a special meeting later. It's thought the party's governing body will formally ask him to resign. He's faced increasing pressure to quit since December, when he lost control of the governing ANC. And the Zuma presidency has been marred by corruption scandals, a struggling economy and soaring unemployment.
The organization does not belong to a family, does not belong to me, does not belong to this lady.
No way.
It belongs to everybody in this country.
We are degree graduates, we have no jobs. We go door to door handing our CVs. We have no jobs.
And so, whether he's pushed or resigns, Jacob Zuma will soon be out of power, and Cyril Ramaphosa is poised to take his place. And if this speech is anything to go by, he's planning to get tough on corruption. Sarah Corker, BBC News.
In a significant move, America's Vice President said that the US is ready to talk to North Korea. In an interview with the Washington Post, Mike Pence said the policy of maximum pressure and sanctions would continue, but he also said that if North Korea wished to talk, the US would listen. Our correspondent Stephen McDonnell is in Seoul, and he says the diplomatic situation seems to have changed significantly in just 24 hours.
Could the United States now be considering unconditional initial talks with North Korea? If this Washington Post report is to be believed, then at least it's on the table. It seems that this plan has been hatched by US Vice President Mike Pence in discussions with South Korea's President Moon Jae-in. Now, the sequence is kind of important. So Mike Pence, he meets with Moon Jae-in in Seoul, and President Moon says, I'm going to meet this North Korean delegation. And I guess he's the one who's reassuring the United States, we're going to keep the sanctions pressure on North Korea, we just want to talk. Okay, so then Moon Jae-in has his meeting with the North Korean delegation, including the North Korean leader's sister, Kim Yo-jong. Then after that, he sits down again with Mike Pence while watching an event at the Winter Olympics. Now, they're discussing global politics while watching the Winter Olympics, and Moon says to Vice President Pence, well, actually, in that meeting with the North Koreans, I suggested to them that they open a dialogue with Washington. And I think in these discussions, again, they've spoken about and come up with this idea that you don't have to take the pressure off North Korea to at least have some sort of initial talks. And according to this report, this is a reporter who was with Mike Pence on Air Force 2 after he left here, that the Trump administration is seriously considering this. And if it takes place, it would be a massive change in policy from the Trump administration.
Stephen, we've just been seeing some pictures of Kim Jo-young on our screens. Her arrival and her being in Seoul and in South Korea has been all over the Western media. How has that visit gone down in Seoul, in South Korea itself?
Oh, of course, it's getting wall-to-wall coverage here. And I think there's been some misunderstanding in certain circles. I mean, some members of the public have been complaining that the media has been covering her visit so extensively, in perhaps an even fawning way. Well, I think the misunderstanding there is that this is just a huge story, not only in South Korea, but it has enormous implications for the whole world. I think South Koreans understand they don't necessarily love her or are going to let the North Korean regime off the hook for its considerable human rights abuses or having nuclear weapons. It's just that the majority of people here who voted Moon Jae-in on a platform of attempting dialogue think that some sort of connection with the North is the best way forward in terms of peace, given that all those years of freezing them out hasn't stopped the North from having its nuclear weapons. And the other aspect of this is people are absolutely fascinated with her because we know nothing about that leadership group in North Korea. I mean, who'd even seen footage of her before this week? Now there are pictures, photos. The South Korean press is watching her every facial expression to try and work out what she's thinking. I mean, this is the first time she's been to South Korea. Does she like the place? Is she comparing it with the North? What will she be telling her brother about here? So, you know, all these things, although they seem flippant on one level, have huge geopolitical ramifications.
And that's the BBC's Steve McDonald. Let's look at some other stories making the news. State prosecutors have filed a lawsuit against the Weinstein Company in New York, alleging that the studio failed to protect staff from Harvey Weinstein. Mr. Weinstein has been accused by more than 50 women, but he denies allegations of non-consensual sex. A lawyer for Harvey Weinstein said that while his behavior was not without fault, there certainly was no criminality. Reports from Syria say at least a dozen people have been killed in renewed attacks on a besieged rebel-held enclave on the outskirts of Damascus. Activists in the eastern Ghouta region said there were airstrikes in the two towns. Syrian state media said government forces had responded to rebel mortar fire that had landed in the center of the capital. Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel says she had to make painful concessions to secure a coalition deal with the country's Social Democrats. Hitting back at critics who say she sold out to stay in power, she told German television that handing over the finance ministry to the SPD had been hard, but that there had been no real choice. And a luxury hotel that had served as a detention center for dozens of princes and top officials has reopened to the public. Princes, ministers, businessmen had been held at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in the capital, Riyadh, since November as part of the kingdom's anti-corruption drive. Investigators are searching snow-covered fields south of Moscow for the wreckage of an airliner which crashed on Sunday, killing all 71 people on board. The plane, operated by Saratov Airlines, was en route to the city of Orsk in the Ural Mountains when it came down just minutes after taking off from Moscow. Steve Rosenberg reports.
In frozen fields near Moscow, this is all that remains of Flight 703. CCTV cameras captured the moment the aircraft smashed into the ground and exploded in a fireball. Its wreckage strewn for a mile across the Russian countryside, half buried in snow. Conditions were treacherous. The emergency services struggled through snowdrifts to reach the crash scene, but it quickly became clear this was no rescue operation. Their job was to recover the bodies. The Saratov Airlines flight had taken off from Moscow's Domodedovo airport with more than 70 people on board. It was bound for Orsk, 900 miles southeast of Moscow in the Ural Mountains. But minutes after takeoff, the plane disappeared from radar. It had crashed near the Russian capital.
We
saw it burning up in the sky, this eyewitness says. Then it fell. There was a blast, a loud boom. It's unclear what caused the Antonov 148 jet to fall out of the sky. The Kremlin has ordered an urgent investigation, and President Putin today offered his condolences to the families of the victims. But that is little comfort to the relatives and friends of those on board Flight 703. At Orsk Airport, grief mixed with disbelief as people realized they'd been waiting for loved ones who would never arrive. The recovery operation will continue through the night. Emergency teams are still searching for victims of this crash and for clues to what caused it. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
Oxfam faces crisis talks with the UK government later following claims of sexual misconduct by aid workers. The International Development Secretary will meet the charity after warning that the scandal had put its relationship with the government at risk. Oxfam has announced new measures for the prevention and handling of sexual misconduct cases. Angus Crawford reports.
First Haiti, now Chad, one of the poorest countries on earth. New allegations that Oxfam workers paid local women for sex. The charity says it's shocked and dismayed, but can't confirm the reports. The head of the mission there at the time, Roland van Houwer-Myren, was the same man who 5 years later in Haiti resigned after admitting using prostitutes. 4 others were sacked. As the scandal grows, the International Development Secretary Penny Mordaunt has sent a strong warning to all British charities receiving public money. They'll lose the cash if they can't show a robust approach to safeguarding.
I'm very clear. It doesn't matter whether you've got a whistleblowing hotline, it doesn't matter if you've got good safeguarding practices in place. If the moral leadership at the top of the organisation isn't there, then we cannot have you as a partner.
She said Oxfam didn't give her department the full facts about what happened in Haiti.
It's about, was there any harm done? Was there any involvement of the beneficiaries of aid involved? Was there any impact on them? And they told us categorically no. And they also told us there was no...
That was a lie, wasn't it?
Well, quite.
At a meeting tomorrow, the charity will be given one last chance or be stripped of its taxpayer funding. BBC News asked Oxfam for an interview. The request was refused. But in a statement, its trustees announced a series of reforms to strengthen the vetting and recruitment of staff, set up an external whistleblowing helpline, and bring in mandatory safeguarding training for new employees. There have been more revelations about other charities too. Reports that Christian Aid, Save the Children and the British Red Cross have all investigated staff over sexual misconduct allegations. Some who know the sector well aren't surprised.
People need to realise that the vast majority of aid work in crisis situations is extraordinary. It saves lives. It helps people who are very, very vulnerable. But aid agencies need to do a lot more to make sure that the best people are going into these areas, they are monitored, and that these people who are very vulnerable, they have a voice too in how this unfolds.
The government's now demanding every charity receiving taxpayers' money disclose all past and current cases of sexual misconduct. A scandal affecting one charity is now threatening to engulf the entire sector. Angus Crawford, BBC News.
Stay with us on BBC News, still to come. It's one of India's most expensive films and one of the most controversial. We speak to the star of the Bollywood movie Padmavat about why the cast are getting death threats. This is BBC News, the latest headlines. The ANC says the fate of South Africa's President Zuma, who's caught in a corruption scandal, will be decided within 24 hours. In a significant shift to the position of the US, Vice President Mike Pence has said he could be ready to talk to North Korea, although the policy of maximum pressure and sanctions would continue. Now, the British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson has told the leader of Myanmar, the de facto leader of Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi, that there needs to be full and independent investigation into violence in the state of Rakhine. During talks in the Burmese capital, Naypyidaw, Mr. Johnson also urged her to create the right conditions for Rohingya Muslims, many of whom have fled to neighbouring Bangladesh, to be allowed to return home safely. Well, staying with that story, 3 British aid workers have filmed their efforts to help some of the hundreds of thousands of Muslim Rohingya. The BBC's Chris Rogers has been looking at the charity's footage and piecing together their mission. Now, a warning that some of you may find the images contained within this report distressing.
The world's largest refugee camp. This is home to more than 800,000 Rohingya Muslim refugees, escaping persecution in Buddhist-dominated Myanmar. Dr. Rames Momeni, Genevieve Jones-Hernandez and Sarah Wade have travelled the world helping refugees, but nothing can prepare them for what lies ahead. Their journey begins at the gateway to the camp where newly arrived refugees receive basic aid.
What it is that they receive here is a bag with a bucket and I guess some building essentials.
But the Humanitas charity are heading deep into the camp, a 2-hour trek where there's no aid, to set up a medical centre.
The baby is 10.5 days and hasn't been breastfed.
Wow.
There are so many babies, newborns, don't have any food, starving. She was prescribed vitamins, but just for her, not for the baby. Honestly, it's like the baby's dying. So we've just organised for her to go and get referred because she needs to go to a hospital. For that, she needs to have her ID card.
They're just in incredible pain with all these sores all over their heads and really dry skin and cracked skin all over their body. So we were, literally just rubbing them down with Vaseline.
This is a newborn baby. It was born yesterday, and they tied the umbilical cord with just a piece of rope. Today, like, it's been non-stop, and they're shivering, coughing, throwing up. Seriously.
I think we expected to turn up and be working alongside a lot more organisations or volunteers. Within the Syrian refugee crisis, and it was full of organisations and volunteers and people there on the ground, and I think we expected this to be slightly similar, and it isn't.
Her pulse is very low. So we're just rushing to the hospital. We got these newly arrived Rohingyas and severe dehydration.
There is absolute lack of aid for these people.
All of these people tired, sick, hungry, and yet to reach their fun in this camp and set up home.
It's not so much as a difficult thing to be here. I think it would be more of a difficult thing to leave, knowing that we're leaving these people in such a dire situation.
It's been confirmed that 3 British tourists were killed in a helicopter crash at the Grand Canyon in Arizona on Saturday. 3 other British people, together with the pilot, were injured. CBS reporter Mireya Villarreal has the details.
New information is being released about the accident that happened here at the Grand Canyon West area. The accident happened just after 5 p.m. on Saturday afternoon, and we now know that the passengers on board, 6 of them, 3 of them that passed away in the accident, they were all tourists from the United Kingdom. We have spoken with witnesses that actually responded to the scene. These are people that were in other touring groups that were around the canyon at the time. They saw the black smoke, they heard the explosion, and they rushed to the scene to help. They were very surprised to see that there were actually survivors coming out of that helicopter. One man had 95% of his body burned. Another woman, actually a nurse, was there to help treat and triage. She spoke with one of the women, one of the survivors. That woman is a realtor, a realty lawyer from the London area. She says this woman was in excruciating pain and could not stop screaming. She says the toughest thing about treating these survivors was the fact that they had no tools. They had no way to help ease their pain while they were out there. The conditions were so bad, as you can see, it's extremely windy out here right now, and the conditions were so bad the night of the accident that they actually had to wait several hours, actually 8 hours, to get the survivors and the bodies and the crews that were helping them out of the canyon area. It was just too dangerous to transport them at any other time. Right now, we know that the Federal Aviation Administration, as well as the National Transportation Safety Board, they all have investigators here on scene. They are working with the Hualapai Police Department. We also know that Papillon, the company that is actually in charge of the helicopter, they are also working with the police department as well as the federal investigators on this. They have sent their condolences and say that they will cooperate as well as they can with this investigation. We did some digging on this company. We did find out that they have had other accidents in the past. Back in 2001, they had an accident that killed also 6 people in the situation in that particular accident. There was one survivor that has since had numerous surgeries since then. Obviously, right now, this is a very tumultuous situation. It's still under investigation. There is no cause for this accident, and actually right now, all of the commercial choppers in this area have been grounded until the weather clears up in this area and the winds die down over the next 24 hours.
And that was Mireya Villarreal in Arizona. Now for a roundup of the latest action from Pyeongchang on day 3 of the Winter Olympics. In the curling, favourites Canada beat Norway in the first mixed doubles semi-final. A convincing 8-4 win put them into the final, where they'll face either Olympic athletes from Russia or Switzerland. To the finale of the team figure skating, and in the men's single free skating, Patrick Chan of Canada triumphed. The women's single free skating saw Alina Zagitova of Olympic athletes from Russia come out on top. Overall standings put Canada way out in front, followed by OAR and the USA. Also, strong crosswinds hampered progress in the snowboarding, twice delaying the start of the women's slopestyle final. In the last few minutes, the USA's Jamie Allen beat the field of 26 riders at Phoenix Snow Park to take gold. Now, the recently released movie Padmavat is one of India's most expensive films ever made. It's also been one of its most controversial. A cast member received death threats, cinemas were vandalized, and the director of the film was assaulted. Bollywood star Shahid Kapoor plays one of the main characters, and he spoke to us about the movie and the reaction that it's received.
Movies are a huge part of a democracy, you know. It's very important to be open to different views. So I think Padmavat today has fought that battle, and it's come out winning, because it's finally made it out there and it's received so much love. I think all of us who were on the film were very sad with how much it had to deal with before it could finally make it out, and it still hasn't released in a couple of states in the country. Very personal story between 3 people, because it wasn't about war, it was about wanting to acquire another man's woman, and that's why it's a very sensitive subject. You know, people are very passionate about it. We had made the film with really good intent, and there was a preconceived notion about the film, which could only be broken once it's released. I think art can survive if there is a certain amount of freedom and liberation, and films need to be seen in context and with an open mind. Cinema needs to be cherished, and its beauty and its purity needs to be upheld.
A reminder of our top story. The ANC says the fate of South Africa's President Zuma, who's caught in a corruption scandal, will be decided within 24 hours. And in a significant shift to the position of the United States, the Vice President, Mike Pence, has said that he could be ready to talk to North Korea, although the policy of maximum pressure and sanctions would continue. Of course, the stance seems somewhat different to that which he had just a few days ago while he was in North Korea for the Olympics. Now, don't forget that you can get in touch with me and some of the team on Twitter and on Snapchat, all kinds of things. I'm not on Snapchat, I'm just on Twitter. I'm at Nkam Ifejika. Thank you for being with us, and see you again soon.